I've laid the budget on behalf of His Excellency, Mr. President. This budget is based on a few key indicators: a $65 a barrel benchmark, and we are going to stick to it for now in spite of the declining prices, because we feel the average price next year will be around 65 to 70. The production level is 2.27 million barrels per day. We are expecting, we've revised the growth rate based on the new parameters for the country down from 6.35 to 5.5% next year, but that is still one of the fastest growth rates we're experiencing in the world today. We have a budget expenditure of about 4.3 trillion, revenues of 3.6 trillion. We've tried to make up for the drop from $78 a barrel to 65 by raising non-oil revenues. This budget points to the fact that this country is a non-oil country, and I think we want Nigerians to begin to think of the country in that way. So we have worked very hard with the guidance of Mr. President to move on non-oil revenue. So we have closed many loopholes and leakages. We've tried to broaden the tax base. We've speeded up audits. We've looked for everywhere. We've closed some exemptions. All of this will bring additional revenues into the coffers.
Well, as you can see, our focus now is the 2015 budget, and we have joining us to look at it Taiwo Oyedele, Head of Tax and Corporate Advisory Services, PricewaterhouseCoopers. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you.
You've had the Minister of Finance talk about the budget. He said benchmarks are 65, but the focus is on taxes. What's your opinion about this?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, we can debate the $65 per barrel, whether it's realistic. But talking about taxation, the issue is you don't get quick results with taxation. So fiscal policy issues take time to yield results. So if the prices of crude oil is down in the international market and you suddenly introduce new taxes, luxury tax, and you say you're closing loopholes, they won't yield results immediately. But it's always good to plan. So the reason why we're in this position now was because we failed to plan 2-3 years ago.
Yeah, but if you speak with some analysts, they'll tell you that we have a framework in place. We've seen that year on year, the target of the Federal Inland Revenue Service has been increasing. It would seem that they have been making progress on that particular front, and that they seem poised, as it were. Somebody says if we continue work on that particular framework, we might be closing the gap sooner than we think. What's your take on that?
Okay, so a number of issues. One is we have a framework, and the FRS, as well as there's also the customs, they're also part of the revenue agency. You also have the state authorities at the state level. And the FRS, in fairness to them, they've been meeting their targets for so many years. But the question is, if you compare what has been with what could have been, it's a very wide gap. And I say that because if you look at the tax to GDP ratio for Nigeria, especially after the rebasing, it's about 8%. If you take out the GDP of the oil sector, it's about 10 trillion naira, and take out their own tax contribution, you find that the tax of the rest of us to the GDP is about 4%. 4% is the lowest in the world. Even in countries where they are fighting war, like Afghanistan, they have like 11%. Countries like South Africa have over 25%. So you're talking about 4. The benchmark is at least about 20 to 20. We can do 5 times what we're doing now. So, but again, beyond the medium expenditure framework that we have, there's also the thing about the national tax policy. It's a fantastic document. A lot of resources went into it, and it was approved in 2010. And I can tell you authoritatively, nobody is implementing it. So the problem with that is not always about having a framework or having plans, where fantastic people are doing that. It's always with implementation.
That implementation, I was going to take you back to where you talked about, yes, you're introducing taxes. It will not take immediate effect. I was going to ask you, what do we do in the meantime while we're waiting for those newly introduced taxes to take effect. Then you brought up this national tax policy. Who should be implementing it, and why do you think they're not implementing it?
Yeah, okay, so the national tax policy is meant to be implemented by government, which means because it was approved both by the FEC at the central as well as NEC, which means you have all the 36 states say, yes, we agree to it. So what that means is you have the Joint Tax Board, for example, body of tax administrators in Nigeria. They can play a role in that process, but then they still need the support of leadership. They need the support of the National Assembly, because a lot of things that we said in that policy, like let's not have multiplicity of taxes, it's almost like we're doing the direct opposite. From every time and every now and then, you find the National Assembly debating the introduction of a new tax. Now, I don't have anything against luxury tax. They say Nigerians are the largest importer of French wines in the world. We have the most of private jets of any country in Africa, more than most countries in Europe. And in my view also, if you look at something like vanity advert, that's the way I'll put it, because somebody is celebrating their birthday, you have all the pages of newspaper. So they have money that then pay tax. So in a way, that's fine. Because I even think that to a large extent, the poor people in Nigeria bear a disproportionately higher burden of taxation. And that shouldn't be the case. So in terms of the implementation, to come back to your question, it should be government doing it. But I don't think anybody is really focusing on it at the moment.
Right. Over the years, we're still staying with taxes. We've talked about the FIRS. Most of the here, they've met their target. I mean, last year they talked about 3 trillion naira that they realized. Now, if we're moving away from depending on oil so much, do you think the FIRS, with the successes they've recorded so far, would play a better role? Would the taxes that they are getting be brought into the economy to help make the fulfillment of this budget possible?
The answer is yes, but it's a long road to travel. So like I said, last year, FRS made 4.8 trillion naira. Almost 3 trillion out of that came from the oil sector. You have royalty, you have petroleum profit tax, and all manners of levies. So what that means is if the price of crude oil is going down, you'd expect what they will collect would also reduce.
But so if I'm coming here, our budget last year was about 4.4 trillion.
Yes.
And FRS made
4.8. But it's not all the money that the FRS collects that goes to the federal government. So for last year, the federal collectible revenue, they also collect on behalf of the states, and that's the monthly sharing they do in Abuja, was about 10.8 trillion. So this coming year, we're looking at about 11 trillion. Okay, so FRS plays a big role in that by collecting VAT revenue from oil and companies' income tax and all manners of taxes. Now, if we're looking at replacing, and I had an article last week about tax is going to become the new black gold, and that's how it should be. We shouldn't be planning on oil. By the way, there's this illusion that we're a wealthy country because we have oil. Truth of the matter is the oil we have is insufficient to take care of our needs.